Okay, a couple of dozen police, so of course it's an unruly bunch who, when asked to sit down, are sort of... I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. Today's purpose is really to announce formally the School Threat Assessment Coalition of Kenosha, which hopefully is STAC. And that is formally being announced today because we're so excited about what this process means to both the faculty, academic staff, and students here in Kenosha County and their safety moving forward. This coalition really began about 4.5 years ago when we had a meeting among several agencies, so law enforcement and schools, Kenosha schools, and the DA's office, social services. And we were talking about our disagreements on a particular school threats case. And it was a surprising scenario where folks who had worked together on assessing threats many times in our careers were a little flummoxed that we were not agreeing on this particular case. So we convened a meeting, and I tell people it was one of the worst meetings I've ever personally convened because I not only learned that we categorically disagreed amongst our agencies that so often work together about some issues pertaining to school threats, but I cast about. I asked people, well, who's been trained on this? Who has any kind of formal training about school threats? And not a single hand went up in a room full of people, all of whom were charged with this back in 2018. And then we talked about, I assumed we were having a meeting about one student, and I found out literally dozens of these school threats were being assessed by our school staff every year in Kenosha County. So not only did we have no training and no agreement, but this was a problem happening all the time in our schools. So what we did next was we cast about, and we assumed that there would be statewide training at that early date. Again, this is 2018 at that time. And we found that there was no real statewide training going on in any situation. We had to go nationally, and we finally got to the Sandy Hook Foundation. So anybody who's ever thought about these issues knows about the tragedy that happened at Sandy Hook. And out of that tragedy came a foundation which allied with the University of Virginia and a professor, and that professor's name is Dr. Dewey Cornell. And he had put together a body of research, so evidence-based, both format and assessment tools to look at all school threats. And he had done that by working back factually from all of the school shootings that had happened in the United States. So there was a real evidence-based way to be able to think about these issues. And he provided training. So in 2019, we trained more than 100 people, about 150 people. And it was from all the different agencies that touch these cases in Kenosha County. And we began to have discussions, of course, interrupted by COVID, et cetera, but we had discussions on essentially a monthly basis on what to do on these cases based on that training. What we've culminated in the last couple years is an effort to expand those efforts as dramatically as we could west of I-94, to be sure we left no school that wanted to participate in our county out of the mix. And so today with this coalition, really we invite the Western Kenosha County schools because they have now been active partners for more than a year in this coalition. This is a unique coalition, and I want to say that proudly, but I also want you to hear the significance of what this means in Kenosha today. There is no grouping of these different agencies. Again, law enforcement, DA's office, social services, the other agencies that make decisions on these cases, and the schools, all meeting together in common on these cases, okay? There is no coalition like this in the entire state of Wisconsin. We're the first. We've cast about nationally, and there is no grouping of individuals in the entire country that have gone as far as we have. Common trainings, common coalitions, regular meetings to talk about best practices. So we are a pioneer in this particular effort. Why are we doing this? So what is it that we are hoping to bring forward? What's different now? And really, the key for us is to use evidence-based decision-making both to assess each individual case, in other words, to figure out how to rank the threat and what resources should come, but also then to bring resources as early as possible to bear in these cases. Who doesn't believe that early intervention is an absolute key to keeping our schools safer, right? Bringing resources at the earliest possible stage that we see warning signs or danger signs about future tragedies. And so those early interventions can really be accomplished by doing this. Sharing information, making sure that each agency has all the information it's possible to give. Make sure that when the police are doing an investigation or making a decision, they have everything a school can tell them about what is the best decision. The same for the DA's office. And that one school feels a degree of confidence they're getting full information from another school when a child has changed schools over their academic career. So all of those things are an effort to make sure nothing falls through the cracks. You know, we're conscious, all of our agencies are conscious that while we're in these positions, this is our watch, right? This is the time when the staff and the students in each of our schools in Kenosha County, where we are the ones who are charged with making them as safe as we can. And so we can't afford to leave any stone unturned. We can't afford to leave any bit of information not shared and any piece of evidence not used to do this. We have a number of agencies present here. I'm not going to list them, but I just want to thank them all for being here. There are also a number of dignitaries here who are here demonstrating the ongoing way they've been champions in this effort. The last way I want to explain this is by using a medical analogy. So bear with me for a second. Because now that we have conducted ourselves using these tools for the last couple of years, I can't imagine going back. And I want to use the medical analogy for a second. You have symptoms that you're concerned about, and so you go to an emergency room, right? A medical analogy. You go and you depend on decision makers in that hospital setting, and those would be nurses and doctors. And how are they basing those decisions? Is this the first time they've ever come across this condition? Is this something that they have a broad knowledge of otherwise? No. They're using evidence-based decision-making, right? They're using the research, the body of medical research that's been done before. And each medical decision-maker has been trained on what that evidence-based information is. And that's how they make your diagnosis. And so when we do a threat assessment, of course, we're making a diagnosis. What do they do when you go to emergency room? They really emphasize taking a medical history of you, right? They want to find out what else is going on in your life. Because what else is going on, your background in terms of behavior and your individual decision-making will be a part of how they make that diagnosis, right? And so that's the importance of the investigations that we're asking schools and police to do, to make sure the equivalent of that medical history in the emergency room is done best in these scenarios. And then finally, no matter what the specialty of the medical folks are, no matter what their particular job, and no matter what building, no matter what hospital you're in, they speak the same language. They have the same terminology. They're using the same body of research to make consistent decisions. Well, that's how we do it medically, right? To try to make sure we figure out which are the set of symptoms that are the most concerning and need the most intervention. And so that medical analogy is exactly the thing, the kind of information and techniques, the kind of partnerships we're trying to bring to board to bear in this coalition. I hope that analogy helps sort of understand how different it is when we're not just winging it. Every time there's a school threat in our building, we're not winging it. Every time a police agency is approaching a school threat, they're not winging it. There's a whole body of work and partnerships that we're bringing to bear to try to keep our schools as safe as possible. So obviously, there's been a number of people who've been quite helpful in these efforts. None of what I just talked about could have been done without the aggressive and really profound interest of the Kenosha Police Department and our other law enforcement agencies. But really, the Kenosha Police Department has been there from the very beginning. And so I'm going to ask Chief Eric Larson to come up and make some remarks in recognition of how important the Kenosha Police Department's been in these efforts.
Thank you. I'll be brief. The formation of the School Threat Assessment Coalition of Kenosha is an enormous step forward towards ensuring that our academic institutions are as safe as possible. Early, evidence-based decision-making and intervention is a key component to ensuring the safest environment possible for our students and educators. The ability to achieve this goal must be a multifaceted approach to provide the absolute best opportunity for success. Far too often as law enforcement, we've become accustomed to responding to violent acts that have already occurred. We hope to reduce this need. And while there's never a guarantee that Kenosha County will be immune to school violence, the alignment of the community partnerships that STAT creates provides the best chance for early detection and intervention when a threat becomes known. This, though, is also a reflection of the value that Kenosha puts into partnerships and an extension of existing partnerships that exist in our coordinated response to child abuse in other areas. As chief of the Kenosha Police Department, I'm proud to say that our organization is part of this larger coalition that is dedicated to public safety within our school district. Thank you.
So originally, these meetings and this difficult work, this sort of brand new pioneer kind of work, was done with a woman named Sue Valeri, and her predecessor or her replacement, the individual who's taken her job at Kenosha Unified School District as the chief of school leadership, is here with us now. It's really important to let you know how enthusiastic a partner he's been. He's an individual who has, I think, contacted me a couple of dozen times over the last couple of months about very specific questions about how we would talk about this, how we would make sure that schools were trained. It's really because of his contributions and Kenosha Unified that we've now trained more than 200 people in our Kenosha area on the particular evidence-based techniques, and now have developed 19 trainers of our own. So we're a self-sustaining operation, which we think is very important. So I want you to share your enthusiasm for one of our most enthusiastic partners, Bill Haithcock.
Thanks, Mike. I'll shoot you an email later this afternoon with another question. Good morning. I would like to thank Mike and all of the partners of the STAT Coalition for your commitment to this work. I want to mention Sue Valeri because she had a huge part of this. My predecessor and Wendy Tyndall, who was unavailable to be with us today, have been with this work for the start and have been just great champions of this work. So thank you to both of those individuals. Student and staff safety is a top priority for those of us here at Kenosha Unified, which is why we have prioritized this work. We are proud to work alongside this team of professionals to do all we can to prevent violence in schools throughout Kenosha County. In Kenosha Unified, as we said, 150, 200 people have been trained in the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, otherwise known as CSTAG. KUSD has been using this model of assessing threatening behavior for the past 5 years. This model is research-based and it's best practice, and it includes risk assessment, threat assessment, threat resolution, safety evaluation, and then safety planning for all the students that were involved in the situation. Through this countywide collaborative effort, our committed partners now share common terminology and common training that we share with one another. It's powerful to us as a school district because now we feel like we're never really alone or working in isolation on these issues. Our school leaders now regularly confer with law enforcement and social service agencies to work through the threat assessment process, not only to assess a threat, but also to assess what students' needs are so that we can intervene and build support for students that are in crisis. Because of this important collaboration, our community's decision-making and supportive services are now aligned. This alignment allows us to accurately address needs and to do everything possible to prevent violence in our schools. Once again, on behalf of Kenosha Unified School District, I'd like to thank you all for being here today and recognizing the importance of this work. I would now like to introduce John Gendron, District Administrator for Westosha Central High School.
Thank you, Bill. On behalf of the school district leaders in Western Kenosha County, I would like to thank the threat assessment team for their time and effort in researching and implementing a practical and thorough approach for threat assessment. The two key words that I want to say there are thorough and practical. Our children, like the students in Kenosha, Milwaukee, Green Bay, all rural areas, deserve the opportunity to attend schools that are safe and where learning remains the priority. Schools have always been asked to run drills if there's an imminent threat in the building. But with the process of this coalition, we now have a, like I said, thorough and practical process to investigate, diagnose, and react to school violence before it occurs. School safety and violence prevention is the shared responsibility of all of us. And that's why I, on behalf of all the district administrators, school leaders, west of the I, appreciate Mike's approach to us, coming out and meeting with us and allowing us to have a seat at the table. Because as I mentioned before, school safety is just as important in Kenosha as it is at Wissosha Central, as it is at Paris Grade School. So in closing, I'd like to thank District Attorney Gravely, his team, the Kenosha Police Department, the Kenosha Sheriff's Department, and all of the other agencies that are represented here today and have been part of this process for making school safety a priority for us all. Thank you.
So I asked for the opportunity to introduce the next speaker, who is our county executive, Samantha Kirkman. I did that because when I first began this process of thinking about what would statewide training look like, or what else could we do about this? My ally in those conversations, and I believe we maybe had 10 conversations about that over the years, was a legislator named Samantha Kirkman from our western end of the county, who has championed this issue, I assume, well before I ever had those conversations, because she was already highly knowledgeable, highly passionate about this information from the very beginning. So it, of course, is no surprise that now she is the head of the county, that she has been guns a-blazing to be sure that the county agencies were champions of this work as well. So I wanted to be sure I got a chance to personally thank her for her ongoing experience on this issue and the passion she has brought to this issue over many years. So thank you, Samantha Kirkman, and I'd ask you to speak.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for having me here. I also want to thank our Attorney General Josh Call for his leadership in Madison on this particular issue. I also want to thank the coalition members that are here today that I stand with in support of this group and their mission. Addressing school violence has been an issue that, as Mike said, had been with me long before my position here. As a mom, this also hits home. Again, I think every parent wants their kids to go to a school that's safe and that people know that there's a plan in place, that if something happens, everybody's going to be working together. And I just want to go off just a little bit. It is great to see a coalition here today being proactive and not reactive. And again, it's due in part to the leadership of Mike and the Attorney General. During my time in the legislature, I had a strong role in school safety. Again, there have been many incidents across the state and across the country that brought this issue to the forefront. And in my role as the co-chair of the Joint Audit Committee, we did an audit of our school safety plans across the state and the funding that we had put forth. And again, it's putting forth the best practices that can be duplicated from here to Superior. These are the things that are important, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So working together with coalitions like this, I hope that we can bring this across the state, and that's why it's so important for me to be here, along with our social services team, because again, many times they're the people that are getting the contacts. In addition to the school administrators, they might see something. So when you see something, you need to say something. And being able to pick up the phone and call somebody who might have knowledge about a particular situation is so critical. And the speed that you can do it is so important. So again, I just want to thank everybody for being here today. And I look forward to working together with the coalition in the future.
So I mentioned to you in 2018, this grouping of folks in Kenosha County had no one to look to. We were grasping around to see if there was anyone on the statewide level who was sharing our concern about this issue. And of course, I found Representative Kirkman, who was already thinking about and talking about this. And we found an immediate ally in the brand new Attorney General. I think it was brand new at that time, right? In 2018, brand new. Who was already talking our language on school safety. So this is something that from the very beginning that Attorney General Josh Kaul was an ally on. His Office of School Safety, which is in the Department of Justice at the state level, is now a active and aggressive and extremely helpful participant in each of our meetings. Always able to summon and describe state resources that are available for the problems that we come up with. In fact, our strategy sessions have now become, here's a problem that's come up, and the Office of School Safety saying, well, here's your resource for that. And then we bring up another problem, and then they say, well, here's your resource for that. So it's become a much different and much more satisfying process as we brainstorm the issues that come up each week and each month. And as I said, in 2018, there was no statewide training that was going on that we could find. Well, guess what? When Josh Kaul became the Attorney General, he implemented that, and there's statewide training based on evidence-based concepts that now goes on across the state on these issues. And we have the Attorney General to thank for that. So longtime champion of this issue, had to be here when we started this coalition that we're so excited about. Thank you to Josh Kaul, and I'd ask him to come up and talk.
Well, first, thank you, Mike, for that kind introduction, and thank you to everybody who's here. First, I want to just share a couple of quick anecdotes that relate to some of the points we just heard from the county executive and from DA Gravely. When I started as Attorney General, one of the first conversations I had with the DA afterwards was about school safety and about how important it was to him to build the kinds of models that we are talking about here today. And that's a conversation that we have continued and built upon over the last several years. At the same time, then legislator Representative Kirkman was, as she mentioned, co-chair of the audit committee. And not long after I took office, we found out that our Office of School Safety was going to be audited. And for those of you who have been part of an audit, that's not usually something you're excited to hear. But the audit committee made clear that it was, and I hope I'm not sharing any state secrets here, that it was a friendly audit. And what they meant by that was that they wanted to use it as an opportunity to use the audit process to learn more about school safety and how we could build on school safety and develop safer schools around the state. And so we went through a process where we talked about what the Office of School Safety was doing. Legislators made suggestions for how they thought we could improve upon or expand upon the work that was doing. And through that process, we really built a partnership with a number of legislators. And so I'm happy to say that the audit committee certainly lived up to what they promised us at the start. We also identified some areas that we could expand the work that the Office of School Safety was doing. And I've also met directly with then Representative Kirkman about school safety as we work to figure out how to make our schools safer in Wisconsin. So really you have not just local, but statewide leaders who are working on this. And I know that the local law enforcement agencies here and the schools have been playing a critical role in developing your school safety program as well. So it is no surprise that Kenosha is where an innovative, thoughtful, really leading program around the state is being developed. So first, I just want to congratulate you all on this accomplishment, on the progress that's being made, and let you know that this really is a model. Bringing everybody to the table, everybody together, you can see it in this room as we move forward. This is the most effective way to keep our schools in Wisconsin safe. And this program is one of the models that we are looking forward to pointing to as we talk to other school districts about what can be done to keep our schools safe. So no pressure, but you really are a model. One point I want to make is that targeted violence is preventable. When we see these tragedies happen, there's often questions about what could have been done differently. And then a few weeks later, so often we see this pattern play out where the news cycle moves on, to something else. But people who have really studied this know that these tragedies can be prevented because targeted violence is planned. Often there is somebody in the community who's aware that somebody has a plan to commit violence. But unless that information is shared with people who are able to respond and intervene, that information can't keep our schools safe. So creating as many pathways for people to report concerns about violence is critical to keeping kids safe in our schools. I also think it's really important that we think about this through the eyes of a teacher. Teachers are, of course, focused primarily on educating their students. But for those of you who've been in a classroom, occasionally students misbehave, and teachers need to think about how they respond to that situation. And of course, there are different levels of misbehavior, but distinguishing between typical adolescent behavior, kids acting out, as happens day in and day out in schools across probably the world, versus something that's really a danger to the safety of our students. That's not something that we know intuitively. It's something that research shows us when those situations arise, and having common practices, having an understanding of what that research shows, it leads to results that lead to safer schools, it leads to more equitable interventions, and ultimately it leads to more success for kids in our schools. So it's vitally important that these kinds of programs are in place. At the state level, we have sort of advanced in parallel to what you've been hearing about in Kenosha County. The Office of School Safety was created in 2018 with a large grant program that has helped provide funding for physical security upgrades at schools. It's also provided funding that went to training on social and emotional learning and other programs in schools. And our Office of School Safety has innovated over the last several years, developing a threat assessment protocol and continues to assess threats. It's developed a school safety guidebook, critical incident response teams, and a Speak Up, Speak Out program, a program that can be contacted by anybody in the state associated with a school environment who has concerns about a threat. We have trained analysts who are prepared to respond. And I want to emphasize that that program is a supplement to what's being done at local school districts. We encourage everybody who's got concerns about school safety to contact your local school officials, contact local law enforcement, the DA, contact somebody locally. But for kids who don't feel comfortable reaching out or would like another place to reach out, or for parents for that matter, or school officials, SUSO, the Speak Up, Speak Out program, offers another opportunity to report. You can do that online at speakup.widoj.gov, at 1-800-MY-SUSO-1, or on our mobile app. You can go to our website at Speak Up, Speak Out and learn more about that. So again, I want to just thank everybody who has been a part of getting this project off the ground. We look forward to seeing all of the accomplishments that this program has. And I believe that I'm the last listed speaker, but like all good prosecutors, DA Gravely has reserved time for rebuttal. So let me turn it back over to him. Thank you all.
Well, I'm going to really surprise you. I have nothing else. So I invite anybody who is a member of the press to ask questions of the panel.
We all see the headlines in the news after the school shooting. Do you hope this gives parents some peace of mind going to school these days now? For anybody, take it.
Well, I mean, this is a coalition that is trying to be proactive and not reactive. So yes, giving people that opportunity to, if they see something, say something, and going forward again. I think this is a strong coalition of our stakeholders here in Kenosha County, and hopefully can be duplicated across the state with other leadership.
Attorney General, what would be your message to parents with this?
County Executive Kirkman mentioned before that she's a parent, and if you're a parent, we all view this through the same lens, I think. My kids are 8 and 5, they're in 3rd grade and kindergarten. And I can tell you, and I think probably everybody who's been to school realizes this, schools feel different today than they felt like when I was a kid going to public schools in Wisconsin. And a lot of those changes are really good changes to keep our kids safe. Having a single point of entry, for example, or locking classroom doors. Those are data-driven steps that make kids safer. But I think there's also a recognition that we can't just turn our schools into fortresses. We've got to do more to keep our kids safe. And that's what this is about. It is